All right, guys. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Results Loading Podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm, of course, your host, Michael Atkin, and today I'm very excited to introduce a leader in the procurement and supply chain world, Jacob Van Noie. Jacob is currently the Director of Purchasing at Jones Sign Co., bringing with him years of experience in supply chain management, materials handling, and operations planning. Having held key roles at companies like AriensCo and Amcor, Jacob has developed expertise in driving efficiency, managing procurement processes, and building strong supply chains, of course. We'll be diving into his career journey, lessons learned along the way, and his insights into the ever-evolving world of supply chain and purchasing. We'll hear more about that from Jacob himself, of course. But with all that being said, Jacob, welcome. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure's all mine.
Absolutely, man. Thanks again. And diving right in here. So your career spans across multiple roles in supply chain management, operations planning, as we kind of just went through. Can you walk us through, Jacob, how you got your start in the industry, what initially drew you to the world of materials and supply chain management? Just speak a little bit to how we got here and how all of this got started.
Yeah, absolutely. I can say it really the way I got started into, supply chain and really the materials world, it's kind of by accident. I was going to school originally for journalism, and I took a couple years of journalism classes, and after a little while, I kind of decided it's going to be really hard to do what I want to do in that space, and also, make a decent wage doing it. Journalism's a pretty tough gig right over the gate. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, 2-ish years into school, and said, oh, I'll start taking some business classes, and supply chain classes really kind of stuck out as interesting and enjoyable. Certainly, I thought so at the time. They're far more enjoyable than say, marketing or HR or finance or anything like that. I like the operations and the supply chain side of it. So I ended up finishing out my degree with the supply chain and ops management degree from UW Oshkosh. Graduated in 2009, and around that time, I'd say the economy wasn't real great. Ended up taking a position, a customer service position, until I could kind of get into that supply chain world. So I took a customer service position for like a year and a half before eventually getting hired into the Oshkosh Corporation as a material specialist, which was an entry-level position, but it was in supply chain, which is what I was looking for. I was really open to supply chain or ops, and really that role was a good mix of both. I spent a lot of time on the assembly lines on the floor, working with the people that were actually putting together, the product, but with the supply chain focus. So it was really, trying to ensure the right part at the right time, the right quantity, all that sort of thing. My main responsibilities at that position were just plan for every part, PFEP as we called it there, and many companies call it. So I kind of just fell into it. I worked at Oshkosh Corporation for about 3.5 years. Got a job a little bit closer to home with the Ariens company, similar position, materials manager position with them. Very similar in responsibilities, but Ariens is a smaller company than Oshkosh Truck was. So it was a little bit more broad experience. So not just the plan for every part, but I was actually they didn't define it this way there, but I had all those same responsibilities on the floor, but then I was also the buyer for the snow facility. At least at the time. So I did that for a couple of years before they promoted me to a supply chain manager position, which was new for the company. And then as part of that, they wanted me to help me and a couple others to help define kind of what that role looked like, which was really, we called it supply chain manager, but it was really a purchasing manager role is what it ended up being. So we kind of hired our first official buyers with the company at that time. And then we just kind of led the supply chain from the purchasing side. And once the material got to the building, it was handed off to the operations group. So that was a new change for us there. So I did that for a couple more years. Life happens. I took a position with Amcor, did some ops planning with them for, I was there for about 2 years, and I had some contacts over at the Aaron's company that said, "Hey, would you consider coming back? I love that company, and I have no issue taking a phone call for them." They had a couple of people retiring, and I said, "Sure, let's talk," and we were able to reconnect. So, actually worked there for another 3.5 years after I came back, and just recently took a position with Joan Sign after leaving Aaron's. So I was the director of purchasing.
Fantastic. And you mentioned something interesting earlier. I think it was when you were at Oshkosh when you were physically on the line, right? And like physically working in the warehouses, and now obviously director of supply chain, you've worked your way up into more managerial roles and whatnot. But what impacts did actually working on the line have on your ability to manage the supply chain now? I've had other directors of supply chain here on the show who have had similar experiences and similar come up to you when, I think they have a better understanding of how to lead and manage supply chain, especially when it comes to planning and getting buy-in from the team. What impact has your experience being that worker had on now you sitting in like a boardroom, for example, and being a director of the entire operation?
Yeah, great question. I think the easiest, the most obvious thing for me to say there is that you really understand how your decisions impact the business. So, at Oshkosh Corporation, you're sitting there on the line, you make or maybe up in your office rather, you make a decision, you change, something on your Kanban record, you change a quantity, you change a location. And if you don't talk that through with the person who's affected by it, you really don't know if what you did is any good or not. So, having that exposure to the people that were actually, your internal customers, uh, having to work with them on a lot of the things that you were doing, it was huge. Like I say, you just got to see the impacts of what you're doing right away. So it was super beneficial, and it's something that you carry forward with you. I don't like to make decisions in a vacuum, generally speaking, and I think that's a big reason why.
What about the buy-in and like the culture that you're establishing for, your team, and them understanding and knowing that, and I know you're doing more of the purchasing, you're doing more of a purchasing thing now. But when you've actually been in their position before, I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about the differences in the culture and tone it sets when getting the buy-in from the team, as opposed to just bringing in some guys, never seen the outside of an office, and, someone like that trying to get buy-in, I keep mentioning, or, making sure that we're getting that cultural fit, if you will. What has that done for you in developing your teams and those who, work with you and underneath you and whatnot?
Yeah, I think that's, it's a good topic. I think company culture is, one of the most important things that I'd like to, instill in the teams that I'm with, the teams that I'm involved with. And I think, absent that buy-in, absent, those people buying into the company culture, it just never seems to work out, right? If you've got, employee A who is totally bought in and they understand the culture, they understand the business, they understand we're here to make a buck. Organizationally, that's what we're here to do. Versus employee B who's just there to punch a clock. Employee A always does better in that scenario, at least in my experience. Um, Making sure that they understand the impact of their decisions and how they can kind of affect the entire supply chain, at least through their role. It's always worked out. I just had better results with people that have been bought in. So I try to make that a point during any team meetings or any one-on-ones, just to maybe give you a quick example here at Jones. We had a customer come at us with a pretty short timeline, and a lot of people were frustrated by it because it meant their timelines were short. And at the end of the day, I think it was read wrong, I think, by a lot of the folks on my team initially, where it was like, we're frustrated, we don't have any time. But really, it's like, we're here to satisfy that customer's need. They had a short timeline themselves. We should be celebrating that we can get this done so quickly, not frustrated that it's, I get the frustration.
Inconvenience. Yeah, of course.
It's really like you're making that customer's day by, coming through on our end. So, yeah, just things like that I think are really important to try and drive home with the team whenever you can.
Right. And I think getting that result, like you mentioned at the end there, it's like we should be excited that obviously initially we weren't happy about it, but as a team, we were able to kind of establish this collaboration, get this turned around really quickly in a timeline that's much shorter. I mean, that can really, really energize a team once, okay, everyone has this moment of frustration together. Okay, we're a little bit pissed. It's a little bit of an unreasonable ask. It happens. Like, customers can be that way. And we know that, and that's the way it is across every industry. But ultimately, to your point, it's kind of like an opportunity, because once we're able to shake that off, that moment of frustration, and you turn it around and it turns into an accomplishment, it's like a huge win moving forward down the road, and a huge kind of ego win for the team. It's like, man, what else are we capable of? And it can kind of, light everyone on fire a little bit. It's like, maybe onto something here. We got a pretty talented group. It's like, what else can we do, right? And then you're at the helm trying to like promote that kind of behavior, as as directors have to do.
Absolutely.
So, Jacob, obviously, procurement, supply chain kind of fall under that operations umbrella. You spent a lot of time in supply chain, a lot of time in operations. Now you're the director of procurement at Jones. Can you talk a little bit about why we made the shift over to procurement? Do we like it more? Obviously, like I said, they go hand in hand, really, and under that umbrella of operations in general. But why the shift to procurement? Do we like it more? How's everything going on that front? Just given it seems like your past, you really had more of a love for the supply chain side.
Yeah, I think, well, to me, procurement being part of that supply chain, I've been involved in procurement in every role that I've held, basically. So, like I say, going back to Aaron's, that supply chain manager role really was more of a purchasing procurement type position, more than the entire supply chain. It was a very broad position, just given the size of Aaron's company. So I've been involved in purchasing, and even when I recently came back to Aaron's, it says materials manager on my resume if you were to look at it, but I'm working hand in hand with purchasing. And I think for me to have a little bit more direct experience on the purchasing side, I think it's important, just from a personal diversification of my skills, I guess you could say. Don't want to be pigeonholed too much into just one bucket. So I know for myself, operations and materials management is something I'm very confident in my ability to do, and purchasing as well, but just not as much as those other areas. So absolutely kind of looking for that next challenge, that next thing to develop myself further with. And I think that's where purchasing, more direct purchasing role like I have now is.
Right. And you've kind of stayed in similar industries within supply chain and operations. And did you get to a point at your previous role when you're like, okay, like I have almost mastered the supply chain side, I want to go and sink my teeth more into procurement side? I know they go hand in hand, and you've always had involvement in both, but now you're specifically a director of procurement. Did you reach a point when you were thinking, hey, I'm doing a lot of supply chain, I pretty much got this completely under control, like I'm going to go seek out an opportunity on a more procurement heavy front? And if so, why? Why did you kind of start having those thoughts, and how did we get to that point?
Yeah, I'd say 100% you're right on the right track there. I think I don't know if I would say I mastered anything, but I felt very comfortable with what I was doing. I don't know that I was challenging myself within the role that I had, and purchasing director position that I have now. It's definitely a challenge. There's definitely new things I need to learn, and things I haven't done before. So yeah, I think that definitely played a big factor in it.
Yeah, kind of taking that new leap of faith, even from someone who's already had a very like illustrious career, had success already, and you got to a point when it's like, okay, I'm not hitting a ceiling necessarily, but it's like I can kind of expand on this a little bit. Like, this is where my expertise lies in operations in general, and going and finding a new role like at Jones, and biting into procurement specifically is, something that seems like you want to go out and attack, and find a little bit of an additional fulfillment, take on a new challenge. I mean, it's not unique. It's great that you did it, because some people are like, you know what, I'm good at supply chain, I'm going to just stay here till I'm 65 and call it a day. You kind of had that moment. You're like, I kind of need a change up. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say, just to expand on that maybe a little bit, is, my personal philosophy in terms of my career growth has always been, I want to keep advancing, keep learning. The positions and the titles, hopefully they come, with that. But to me, I want to make sure that I still have the capacity for that next, whatever that next role is. And if I feel like I don't have it, then I'll probably settle into a role like that. So that's led me to the point of being a director of purchasing. If I feel like I get to that similar point of, hey, I've got this under control, I can do more, then I'll probably, kind of pursue what that next level might be, whether it's a role or what have you. But yeah, that's just kind of how I've always approached it. It's learn what I can, kind of develop an expertise in whatever I can, and if I feel like I've got more to give, then let's start working for that.
Totally. And luckily for you, you've really liked operations since you kind of stumbled upon it in college. So it sounds like you're in a field that you actually enjoy, right? I mean, not everyone can kind of say that, as funny as it sounds, but operations it's kind of like there's a wide net there. You've dabbled in several subcategories within operations, and it's still kind of falling into that category of stuff that you've liked for almost 2 decades now, right? And just expanding your growth and your knowledge. I mean, it's a great thing and something that I think needs to be promoted. Even when you get to director level, it's like, okay, I hit the director level, but I'm not done growing. I'm not done learning. Like, I still want more, and I've already gotten to this point, but like, I would like to take it a step further. It's a really great thing that not everyone kind of feels as comfortable with making that leap of faith, especially when you've gotten to the point in your career that you have.
Sure, I would agree.
So what about significant changes? I mean, like, we've obviously discussed plenty already, your experience and what you've seen, but significant changes in terms of what you've seen in the procurement and supply chain industry since you started back in 08, 09, 2010, and what the industry is looking like now. What is your take on all of this? I mean, how have you adapted to these changes? Can you walk us through a little bit about where we were, where we're at now, in terms of what you're seeing in the industry and where you think we're headed?
Yeah, I could maybe talk a little bit about it. And, to be perfectly honest with you, I think the question's a pretty difficult one to answer, just in general, right? I've worked at a couple companies, but to know the entire industry, I don't know that I'm super confident with that. But I think the biggest changes that I've seen have been the last 4 years. COVID, it's 100% been the biggest change to probably a lot of manufacturing companies. Pre-COVID, we were at I was at Aaron's company pre-COVID, and I would say we were at a point where we're pretty comfortable level of inventory relative to our build. And COVID hit, and it was like, buy whatever you can get your hands on. And that was a transition period for me. I had just left Aaron's and went to Amcor when COVID just started happening all over the place, and it was the same story there. It was buy everything you can get your hands on, because we don't know when we're going to be able to get it next, and we still have customers placing orders and people that still need product, and what's going to happen with the world, nobody really knew. So it was just, buy, tie up all your cash in the inventory, and at least you're able to sell some product during that period. And now we're at that point where actively working on decreasing those inventory levels, and just starting at Jones. I'm not sure if it was ever an active initiative here at Jones prior, but it's certainly one of those things that I'll be looking at now as well, where it's like, let's get down to, a healthy, manageable level relative to our expected build. You got to have something to, some raw inventory to make something, but, you don't want to just be sitting on millions of dollars of basically raw goods. So that to me has been by far the biggest change. I think anyone that got a supply chain degree like me back in the early 2000s, you can kind of throw them out the window, because COVID, I think, just flipped everything on its head. And
Totally. And then, like, of course, major lessons learned. I mean, there are I think within the supply chain and as well as procurement, there are things that you can plan for potential risk, and then there are unprecedented events like COVID or hurricanes, maybe, like the Suez Canal situation a few years ago. Not really a way to plan for that kind of thing. So, for your role as director of procurement now, and then you've held managerial positions in supply chain, how are you working to alleviate some of those risks? Obviously you can do your best and have backup plans for, some potential issues that you can foresee, but the unprecedented stuff, COVID, Suez Canal situation, stuff like that, seemingly is putting the supply chain and procurement market in the news more so these last, few years. I mean, how are you kind of handling and tackling those challenges that you can't really plan for?
Yeah, I think, well, it's tough, right? Because you can't really plan for it that well. But I think what we're trying to do, and what I've started to do here at Jones, is start developing some plans to help identify what those risks are, what they might be. Uh, Meeting with the team, just kind of talking about the categories. Where do we see our biggest advantages, our biggest risks? Doing some SWOT analysis. That's a tool that I like to use to help us do that. That's probably the main thing that I would say. Just meet regularly and talk, and then uh, the flip side of that is communicating that with our executive team. So any of those decisions, again, I don't like to make it in a vacuum. Hey, I've got a risk. Here's what we recommend. What do you guys think? So that at least if the bad thing happens, we're all on the same page as to what we're doing about it and why we are in the position we're in. So.
Totally. And I'd imagine a similar approach to, especially now, like coming from a more procurement side of the house, handling vendor relationships, right? And supplier relationships, and making sure, okay, guys, like we have this order in, are you going to be able to fulfill it? And if not, like I need to know. I mean, are you taking a similar approach to dealing with suppliers and vendors on that front? Because Jones isn't doing manufacturing, correct?
No, they are. So Jones is a sign manufacturing and installing company. So they actually, if you think about, they do some billboards. That's not the main focus of the business, but they do a lot of, sports stadiums, businesses, national account businesses like AutoZone or Chipotle. So they're making the signage for those companies. So we manufacture those right on site in Deep here, Wisconsin, and we have a couple other facilities as well throughout the United States where we manufacture the signs. So those vendor relationships that's a main focus of mine here in the first. I've only been there now for 2 months, but it's something that I'm actively working on right now. So for the sign industry, Jones is industry leader in that regard. There are a lot of sign companies out there, and most of them are kind of mom and pop shops. And then you've got a couple like Jones that are bigger players. So in a lot of ways, we have a lot of buying power, and our vendors understand that and are very good to us in that way. But I'm just trying to develop those relationships. Like I said, I've been there for about 2 months now. Just trying to get to know the players right now that we're doing business with, and make sure that we're taken care of, but we also have to make sure that they're taken care of as well, because I don't want to get in one of these situations where they're not making any money and now they're pissed off at you and not treating you well or anything like that. Having good relationships is just as important as.
Right. And so you're procuring the components and materials needed to go out and like install the signs that Jones manufactures, obviously, right? And those are coming from vendors and suppliers and what have you.
Yeah, so it's some of the things we're buying. It's like steel, plastic, vinyls. There's hardware, things like that. So it's a lot of the same stuff that you'd buy at any manufacturing facility, but it's just a different industry. So the facility that I'm in Deep here, it's all kind of unique job shop type stuff. It's compared to my experience, and that's really the big difference. My experience with Ariens or Oshkosh Corporation. It's Henry Ford's assembly line, it's lean manufacturing, you're building the same 10, 20 things that you always build, and the sign industry is not that. So it's definitely a learning curve.
Absolutely. And having only spent a few months at Jones so far, I mean, are you at this point more prioritizing developing the relationships with the vendors that have been, already own a relationship with Jones? Are you looking to create new relationships with new vendors as well? I mean, as the new director of procurement, I mean, what has your approach been out the gate the last few months to really optimize the procurement process and, see if there's some points within the business that, you can come in and, like I said, optimize right away coming out of the gate? I mean, what has your approach been the last few months in terms of doing that?
Yeah, I think the approach that I've had since I've started is I think I spent the first month just training out on the floor and learning the different, manufacturing techniques, different things that we've been doing, whether it's installing the lights or the vinyl or rolling the steel, anything like that, just trying to, understand the process out on the floor. And so that took me, I'd say 3-4 solid weeks of just doing that. Obviously trying to learn who my team members are as well, get to know them a little bit along the way. And now I'd say the last 3 to 4 weeks has been on the vendor management side. Who those players are, get to know them, kind of understand what's been working and what hasn't from both their side and then on the Jones side. So I don't have any experience with that, and we've been having our buyers, as part of those kind of onboarding discussions as well, just to understand, where are the opportunities. And you meet with these vendors once, and it's like, yeah, we've got a lot of opportunities that are just sitting out there waiting for us that we just need somebody to act on it. So it's been really nice because I've got a bunch of notes to refer back to and a lot of things that we can kind of address here in a short period of time. Again, just a matter of priority and where you want to spend your time. But yeah, so I'd say the last 3-4 weeks has been very heavy on the vendor side, and that will kind of continue going forward.
Right. Yeah. No, and obviously, as a director of procurement, I mean, I think owning those relationships with the vendors are obviously crucial, and getting that personal relationship with them is key, just because I think what's super important for you, and you can keep me honest here, you obviously know more about this than I do, but that transparency element with vendors, especially when, you guys, a big player in the game, doing big volume, and it's like the forecasting element, the transparency element with the vendors is so critical in terms of your department's success in procurement, because like I was mentioning earlier, I've heard several stories before of vendors overpromising, under-delivering, and then it puts you in a bind, costs you money, hurts your reputation, creates lead time delays, the customer gets pissed at you, and so I think that's like, to your point, the last few weeks you've been really working on establishing those relationships and developing them. It's obviously super important for the outcome and success of your impact on the business, right?
Yeah, 100%. And to your point on transparency, I don't know any other way to work than to be transparent. I don't like to, play games or anything like that. So it's hard for me to even, think to be any other way. And I think, just being transparent, not just with the vendors, but with, the teams that I manage, it's been, for me, kind of the best way to do things, the best way for me to work. So yeah, it's just, let's get all the bullshit out of the way and just talk turkey here, and let's make some good moves for each other.
Yeah, no fluff in the business landscape. It doesn't do anyone any favors, especially if it's going to lead to under delivering, especially after an overpromise. Doesn't make anyone look good, right?
Right.
What about any, I know you've only been in the role for a few months. I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but what about any challenges that have landed on your desk so far? Getting you're sinking your teeth in procurement, obviously, in the sign manufacturing industry now. Any challenges or things that have hit your desk that right away you're just like, I don't know, I have no choice but to figure this out. Obviously, I haven't seen this yet. Any situations like that so far?
Luckily, no, not yet. I think, there's always challenges every day that you work, but the team that I've got to work with they're super experienced. They know what they're doing. So there's not been a situation yet that somebody was like, oh, we don't know what to do. These guys that I work with and girls, they've all seen it 100 times before, and but they just got it down. So luckily, I haven't had that yet. I'm sure it's not going to be too long before I do. But.
Yeah, and luckily, it seems like with your leadership approach, in my opinion, from the conversation we've had today, it seems like there's good, you get good reception from your new team that you work with. Especially when you start on the ground floor with them. It's like, I want to be hands-on. I want to see what this looks like. I want to be able to speak to what's actually happening for whatever situation that may come up. Right. And so, you're the new guy, you're trying to catch up. It's great that the team already, has your back. And luckily you haven't had any major challenges yet, but everyone's already plugging away, knows what their role is, and is helping your onboarding process go pretty smoothly, it sounds like, especially, new role, new title, new industry. And then with that being said, Jacob, having managed teams in your previous roles, how would you describe your leadership style? I know you've touched on it a bit today, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into it and how we're getting that buy-in from, your team. We've talked about how starting on the ground floor, being hands-on, but what else? I mean, how are you ensuring that your team is staying motivated and aligned with the organizational goals that are your responsibility to make sure are maintained?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the style question is one that it's a tough one for me to answer. Like, what's your style? I think if you were to Google it, it fall under the servant leadership style. That really is it. Is I'm there to help my team do what they need to accomplish and remove their roadblocks. So whatever I have to do that, I'm going to at least try to attempt that. At the same time, we're there again to make a dollar, right? We're in business to make money. Sometimes, you have to deal with, I don't want to say conflicting priorities, but just, having the right expectation levels. When you talk about motivation, it's tough for me to say, like, how do you motivate your team? Well, I don't know that I really do. I'm there to set an expectation and hold accountability to it, right? It's, motivation, I think, comes from the employee, not from, necessarily the boss. So I'm there to set the expectation, hold them accountable to the expectation, but I'm also there to help them achieve their goals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. And it's not your job to motivate, but I think good managers, good bosses like yourself do create an environment when there is a desire to be motivated and come to work, be efficient, be productive, get it done, as opposed to, like you said, just clocking in 9 to 5, punching the card. Because I think the culture thing is really important. You used a good example earlier with getting a request from a customer that was particularly frustrating and annoying, but you're able to spin it like it was a huge win for the team because, yeah, everyone was a little pissed about it and the request was like very inconvenient. You guys turned it around and it turned into a W and you were at the helm of that, right? And so I think those kinds of wins maybe on paper don't feel that great or sound that, that relevant, but it's a huge team win and that can be a motivating driver for sure. Just, promoting those small wins, even though to everyone else or the outside world, it may not seem that significant.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And if we're using that example again, it's like, the customer is how you get paid. That's how you make money as an individual. Like, we shouldn't be getting annoyed at them, right? It's really a credit to the team and how quickly you can turn around and get done what that customer wants. And, yeah, so I think there's probably a million examples like that. I think more surprising things maybe as a leader, maybe not for me now, but certainly when I was starting out in leadership was, maybe give you a quick example. I've had, again, I don't use names here. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but
yeah.
I remember taking over a team where we had, some real basic attendance issues with some of the people, and just addressing that, I got more. It's not like we even address these things publicly, which is the other funny thing. So, like, you address the attendance issue, and people are obviously talking about it. But then you get more people coming up to you thanking you for doing that because it was never happening before. And then they're like, hey, over time, it's like, we like working for you because you hold everybody accountable. You don't play favorites. You don't let things slide. Like,
yeah, totally. And Jacob, what about we haven't really touched on technology yet. What about the role of technology? You seem like you've got your team's optimized, everyone in line, and there's a lot of efficiency there that's trickling down from the top. How are we leveraging technology to maximize efficiencies in your processes, especially coming from supply chain and operations now with obviously the heavy focus on procurement now? What is that looking like in terms of utilization of technology, especially when there's been so many innovations, especially recently, that has had a particularly positive impact on operations as a whole?
yeah, I think that's probably in my career been one of the more limiting factors in terms of having the right technology or the right data. And I think that's one of the things I like to drill home is, like, I want to use data to make a good decision. And, the ERP systems, MRP systems that I've worked in my career are, quite frankly, were pretty old and outdated. And, there's a lot of times where I would be, spending half my day or more just data mining, not leading a team, not doing those things that I really like to do, and really just mining for data to try to understand like what is happening or what do we need to do differently. I hope we see some clarity here in the future on web-based system, just something that's just more easy to implement, easy to understand. I think everyone uses Excel to a degree that, well, number one, everyone has it, and number two, everyone has every company has somebody that is good at it. So I think Excel becomes kind of a default, analytical tool, and it's good for some things. You know, everyone kind of makes the joke like we don't want to run the business on Excel, but I haven't worked at a business that hasn't used it extensively. So
Totally no, and it's a really good point about wasting time mining for data, because as what's become very clear, I think, to a lot of businesses the last few years is that data is like oil. It's so valuable, and there's so many insights within your business intelligence that aren't being leveraged and aren't being harnessed, because you're spending half your day pulling out those insights and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And by the time you or a data scientist or whoever is able to pull those insights out, that is, bringing to the table something that's relevant or worth noting, the data is irrelevant because 4 or 5 days or weeks have gone by already. And I think with the new technologies now, you're able to get those insights so quickly, and it's like totally revolutionary, especially for the supply chain in terms of predictive analytics, getting those insights into your business intelligence. Oh, maybe we should send these units to the warehouse on the West Coast. The East Coast is expecting some weather. We should reroute these trucks, what have you. These are benefits that obviously weren't available only a few short years ago, and now it's like majorly come on the scene, which is, I think, have a seriously positive impact on not just procurement supply chain, but like I mentioned, the operations umbrella as a whole. It's really teed up for some serious optimization. It seems like the technology that's coming out these days can maybe, get you there in a way or so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I get a chance to, use something along those lines. And, I think right now, like when I describe those situations of like spending half my day data mining, it's like, what I kind of learned over the years is I can do that, or I can just go walk down on the floor and maybe get an answer from somebody, or that I don't have to do all that data mining, and it's probably 90% correct. It's an interesting, to your point on the more technical side of supply chain. Yeah, you need some good systems that can, on the other side of that too, is like sometimes just a simple conversation will get you there. Well,
Totally. But it is nice, like, as you're getting into these like director level positions, that it's like you just get those insights in seconds, right? As opposed to having to spend the several hours data mining, or even having to leave your office to go down to the floor and just ask somebody. It's like if you have a dashboard right there on your desk, you can refresh it, and it's like, oh, good to know. Back like a few years ago, it would have taken me half a day to get what's just, I hit refresh and done. Insights at my fingertips.
No, I'd agree.
Yeah, Jake. So in terms of your career, obviously we've discussed a lot today. It's been illustrious. You've climbed the ladder. You've seen, obviously a lot of success and still growing, which is fantastic. So far, though, what has been perhaps the most significant milestone in your career thus far? And how did that particular moment or role influence your trajectory as a professional?
It's a good question. I don't know that I mean, I've worked on some big projects before that were pretty rewarding. I think, oh boy, I don't even know how to answer that. The biggest milestone. I think at one point I might have had a project that I would actually point to. I really think the thing that I would be most proud of now is not a specific milestone, but it's the daily wins. It's how to manage, how to lead. So
Totally.
Seeing people grow in their careers, hit their goals, develop, that stuff for me is way more fulfilling than, project that I worked on. And it's tough to really pinpoint it down into one specific thing, but I like leading. I like leadership, like supply chain. So that to me, when you talk about shaping a career, I don't see any reason why I would get out of that right now. It's more influential than, a milestone or anything like that.
Totally. No, and it's a great answer. I mean, watching others others around you and their careers flourish, and if you had some sort of role or play in that, I mean, it is obviously super rewarding. So I agree. Small wins are really, really awesome because you have to take them. You take losses. You have to appreciate the small wins, and then obviously those small wins lead to big wins every once in a while, which is great to celebrate. But the small wins definitely need not go unappreciated, and I honestly couldn't agree with you more on that. Yeah, and Jacob, last question here before I let you go. For those just starting their careers in supply chain procurement, what advice would you give them about advancing in the field, finding mentorship? I mean, think about, Jacob from 2009. Like, what would you tell that guy, 15 years ago? What would you tell someone who's just trying to follow a similar career path that you've had thus far?
Good question. I think what I would probably tell that person would be to be open, look for new opportunities, and take them. I think I can give you a quick example. When I was at Oshkosh Corporation, I was pretty new into my professional career at that point, and quite honestly, I'm not sure where I really stood in terms of the ranking of my peers and what anyone thought of me there. And our director of materials at the time said, "Hey, we've got this project. It's something that we used to do. It's kind of fallen to the wayside. We're looking for somebody to resurrect it." I don't know the answer now, but if anyone has any interest in pursuing this, why don't you come and talk to me after the team meeting? So I went in there right away and said, "Sure, I'll do it." Like, I'm looking for a way to grow and to expand, and I think from that point, it kind of changed things for me there. I think at the time I was actually through a temp agency when I started there. Shortly thereafter, I got hired on, and I'm like, well, I don't know if that was the defining reason, but I think it's that attitude of looking for more and looking for opportunities and kind of looking for ways to be of value, to the organization, would probably be my biggest recommendation. That, and just also be open to criticism, because I think as long as it's constructive, it's just going to help you along the way. So.
And being open to taking those leaps of faith, like moving from supply chain to procurement, sinking your teeth into something new, something you've had experience with, but something you want to develop, making those decisions, going after it, and then, widening your base, like exactly what you've done, speaks for itself, which is, fantastic as well. So yeah, Jacob, with that, thank you so much. This has been invaluable. Really, really appreciate your insights, speaking to your experience and sharing some of these examples with us. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and good luck to you. Maybe we'll check in with you in a few years, see what going after at that time. But like I said, thanks again. This has been just great. So good luck to you, and thanks for joining us on the Results Loading podcast.
No, thanks for having me on. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.